Good morning. Today on Spotlight, a look at mental health and how we as a region are addressing it. Meet the new president and CEO of the Detroit-Wayne Mental Health Authority, Willie Brooks. And later, Monroe, Michigan Mayor Robert Clark and Southeast Michigan Council of Government Executive Director Kathleen Lamaco take us inside their 50th anniversary exhibit at the Detroit Historical Museum. It's Sunday, March the 25th. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight from theCUBE. Tell us a little bit about that move and a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been in healthcare and human services for the last 30 plus years, either in healthcare or mental health care. So this is something that I love to do. I love the community mental health system, and I was able to do quite a bit, in my 6 years in Oakland. They're in a very good spot, but I believe that the key to the state is Detroit-Wayne. 25% of the total funding and people served are right here. So taking some of the things that I was able to accomplish in Oakland and bringing them here, I thought it was an opportunity that I just couldn't turn down.
I think the average person would clearly say we aren't putting enough money into our roads, and we see it with all the potholes. Is mental health a similar situation for the state? Are we putting enough dollars on what is clearly an issue, because we keep seeing news reports and incidents all over the country, not just in our own backyard?
Right. Well, not only are we not putting enough dollars in, but we're actually reducing a lot of dollars in some key areas, such as, there's a big struggle with the general funds in the state.
Yes.
And we've seen dramatic reductions in general fund dollars, which allows us to do things such as some of our jail correction and jail diversion programs. A lot of our school programs, we have a presence in over 70 schools in Wayne County, and most of that is done by general fund dollars. And we've seen reductions at a peak in 2010 of $322 million, all the way down now to $120 million in general funds. And what the general fund dollars do is they allow us to do those specialty type things that normal Medicaid dollars cannot cover, such as the school programs and the jail programs.
Yeah, and I keep hearing that it's the neighborhood programs, it's those clinics that are closest to the people, that people are more apt to go to, that are getting shut down,
Yes.
and therefore the access to good mental health care is not available.
That is correct. And that allows us to actually invest in people at an early stage, because most people are not aware of all the backgrounds of mental illness until they hear something on that's being reported of a mass shooting or something
Right.
like that. But mental illness is something that people deal with every day. When you take in consideration that 1 out of every 5 individuals have some type of mental illness, that means just about every family can relate directly to mental illness. And when treated earlier, when giving the proper attention, many people can live normal lives.
All right, we need to take a little break. When we come back, I want to talk about some of those stereotypes, some of those stigmas,
Yes.
whether or not we're making progress with that. And also this whole battle that we have about violence, particularly violence in schools. Are we adequately addressing it if we don't adequately address what's happening in mental health as well?
Very good.
We'll be right back. We hope you stay with us. Is the stigma of mental health, is that getting better?
It is getting better. However, it is not moving at a fast enough pace as it should be. Many families are actually getting involved with promoting more awareness. Now, the ideal situation is, we know that 1 out of every 5 individuals have some type of mental illness, and most people who are involved in it is because they have a loved one that they can directly connect to. The ideal situation is to have people connected, even if they don't have someone directly attached to the situation. So it's a huge awareness as far as the need and the issues that we face on a regular basis.
When we see a situation like we recently saw in Florida, and we've seen them all over the country, and thankfully we haven't had a major one right in our own backyard, but it could happen at any time, any place. Now the political debate begins.
Yes,
what are we going to do about guns? Are we going to let teachers be able to carry guns in schools? All of these things. A lot of debate going on, but are we not having the same level of debate in terms of what maybe is the root cause of what happens all the time?
Right, and I believe that people with mental illness are definitely giving unfair shake when it comes to violence. People with mental illness are more apt to be impacted by violence or to be taken advantage of than the average citizen. And when you look at the percentage of people with mental illness that's actually involved with those types of activities, it's roughly around 4% of all of the different violent acts that are out there that actually impact someone with mental illness. So for some reason, whenever you have someone with a mental illness that's involved with a crime, society looks at it differently. Whereas the other 90% of the crimes that occur with people with no mental illness, for some reason that is acceptable. That is a part of the stigma that is associated with mental illness.
So, Mr. Brooks, how do we address that? How do you, as the president and CEO of Detroit Wayne Mental Health Authority, how do you address it? Do you have to go to Lansing? Do you have to go to various other political bodies and lobby and fight and educate them in a term-limited situation where sometimes the politician is there only a couple terms and they're out?
Right, and that is so true, because years ago we had advocates who were in roles for years who truly understood the situation. Now, as you mentioned, with term limits, it is a tremendous effort to continuously educate those people who are in power and who can make these key decisions on the background of mental illness and being aware of it. Some of our biggest advocates are those individuals, again, that have family members who they can directly relate to. And so we use that as an asset to try and educate others.
What's your major goal?
My major goal is basically two things: inclusion and choice. The people that we serve that have mental illness, we want to make sure that they are included in society. History have shown us that by excluding them and having segregation, how it always works out to their disadvantage. And we also want to make sure that they have choice. We don't want other individuals making decisions for them. That is what we all live for, to be included in society and then have the ability to make choices of our own. That is my goal. That's the #1 motto that I use throughout my career in community mental health, is making sure that individual serves are included and that they have choice like every other citizen.
You're over a board that from time to time has found itself in a little bit of controversy, a little bit of debate. Do you see that board changing much on your watch, and are there key changes that you'd like to make? Are you comfortable with the board that you have now? Is it too big, too small?
Well, I'm very comfortable with the board. My goal is to make sure that the stories that go out, the news go out, is about the wonderful things that we're doing at Detroit Wayne, and to keep the focus on people. And unfortunately, board issues, management issues have taken a lot of the time as far as awareness, whereas there's hundreds of good things that we do on a regular basis.
I heard Warren Evans not too long ago say that the number of beds they're putting in there, he's comfortable with, because he doesn't want too many beds, because he'd rather have people out of jail than in jail. As they build this and fit it into the city, are those conversations that you'll be having with them, giving them advice from a mental health standpoint of how to address it? Because we know that there are a tremendous number of people that go into our penal system as direct result of whatever issue they may be dealing with.
It's not just the humane factor of it, which in my opinion should be the driving force, but when people look at the amount of money that we spend and readily is spent to incarcerate someone versus to actually use the money to give them some of the treatments and items that they need to have successful lives, it's much more cheaper and it's much more humane. So we have to look at that as a balance. Whenever you see people with mental illness with a high hospitalization rate and a high incarceration rate, that tells us that we're not treating the real issue.
Citizens need to speak out more on this issue.
Yes, they do.
And the louder they get, maybe the more reaction they get from their elected representatives.
Right. And things like what we're doing now is very helpful because it brings about awareness and it makes people really understand what the true issues are.
All right. Willie Brooks, good meeting you.
You too, sir.
Good luck.
Thank you.
As president and CEO of that organization. And it's a big topic, so I'm sure we'll be getting you on the show in the future to address it as we need to from time to time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And when Spotlight returns, we'll sit down with Mayor Robert Clark of Monroe. Mayor Clark, as we stand here inside the Detroit Historical Museum, big exhibit for SEMCOG. Why?
Well, it's a great exhibit, first off, and it's our 50th anniversary for Southeast Michigan Council of Governments. SEMCOG is a regional governance for all of our local partners to come together, whether it be county, township, cities, to share ideas about how to manage local government and have good policies.
Yeah. We'd be in trouble without SEMCOG, wouldn't we?
Sure would. You think back 50 years ago, and really it was a bold step by many of leaders years ago to realize that if we collectively, how much better Southeast Michigan could be because of SEMCOG. And some of those early meetings and transformed into SEMCOG, and here we are 50 years later, 50 years, one region.
You're chair. You also are the mayor of Monroe.
That's correct.
Do you get a little tired sometimes with people always talking about Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb, but yet you're a key part of it?
I look at that and think, Wayne, Oakland, Macomb really have a center part of the SEMCOG region. But I always say it's the counties that surround that region that also makes SEMCOG go round. Because if it's just the center core region, then it's not Southeast Michigan. It's more of a metropolitan location. But from St. Clair to Monroe, to Washington and Livingston, as we surround the three in the center, that's what makes SEMCOG great.
Looking at it from Monroe's point of view, looking sort of back at the region, your assessment of where we are right now, and are you optimistic about where this region is headed and where we are? Because it's really regions competing against regions now, more so than cities versus cities.
Right, and I think that's what SEMCOG brought together long ago and is real strong today, with a large number of members, that we think about it regionally. We try to set policy and set even a legislative platform that we share with our state legislators and our federal legislators, that Southeast Michigan collectively is much stronger. I look at it from Monroe and being, I say, the gateway to the state of Michigan, and we're proud of that as people enter the SEMCOG region from out of state. But I also think about that in St. Clair County when those coming from the Canadian side of the border come into our region.
As we walk around this exhibit, people will quickly notice that there's a baseball theme to it, along with your wall of leaders. Why?
Well, we think about our legacy in 50 years ago. Of course, 50 years ago was the 1968 Tigers, and even if you were here, or weren't here, I should say, the story is great, and it really was a revitalization for the city of Detroit, but it was also the whole region. And I think that the connectivity is there because good partners, combine together to make good outcomes. And I think the Tigers were that story, and I think SEMCOG's that story.
All right, well, let's hope that in 2018 we have a repeat on the diamond of what happened in 1968. Mayor, for lack of a better term, this would be what, your SEMCOG Wall of Fame?
You could call it that. I call it kind of the who's who of local government here in Southeast Michigan that has regional planning concepts. It's a legacy wall, but it's also a current wall.
In all of these, obviously there's a baseball theme to it. Looks like baseball cards that go along with the 68 theme. But all of these are past chairmen and chairwomen.
Well,
of
participants
SIMCOG?
and chairpersons as well, but it's regional ambassadors. There's members that were mayors previously. Of course, Dennis Archer is here, and other members of our community. Marianne Mahaffey's on the wall, Conrad Mallett. I mean, Richard Austin's name here is one of our regional ambassadors from way back. But it's yet our people that are on here that may not be recognizable. Look up at John up here, LaBelle, and he's one of the longest serving commissioners. Right. Yet he served his county well.
He was Livingston County.
Yes, and we also served SEMCOG well. So before we go though, Chuck, I wanted to say, because we went with the theme with the baseball card, because of course we talked about the 1968 Tigers, and I do have a baseball card.
Oh, you got your own baseball card.
It has my stats on the back, and I wanted to sign it and say thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you. This is an honor.
Sharing SEMCOG's story.
All right, very good. I'll put it with some of my other sports memorabilia.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
All right, Mayor, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chuck.
Next on Spotlight, Kathleen Lamaco, Executive Director of SIMCOG. As we stand here in this SIMCOG exhibit, it will probably make people walk through and say, why SIMCOG? And your answer would be?
My answer would be that there's lots of things that no one government can do alone. And so we're the vehicle where they can work together to plan for the future, implement programs for the future.
How much has SIMCOG and how much has the region changed in the last 50 years?
Well, in terms of SEMCOG, we've changed in that when we first started, there were 60 or 70 local governments that were interested in coming together to plan for our future. Now we have elected officials from 171 local governments that sit down together and talk about what do we need to do together to make this region a good place to live, to work, and to have a good quality of life.
When SIMCOG does its best work, is that usually very quiet and one that doesn't garner a tremendous amount of fanfare or attention from the public?
Well, I'll answer that in two ways. First of all, I mean, we work for local governments and local elected officials, and our work moves forward best when they decide to champion that work. So we provide data and information and provide a foundation for them to make decisions together. But ultimately, it works best when once we reach decisions, they're the ones that are championing them.
And you mentioned data. Data really drives the work that SIMCOG does in many respects, correct?
Yeah, it provides the foundation. When we decide to address an issue, for example, water quality, well, what's the first thing we want to find out? We want to know what is the water quality, where is water located, where are our wastewater treatment plants? So we find that that's the place to start our work.
How gutsy was it to start SIMCOG? And it was controversial, I understand, when the idea first came up.
Absolutely. I think people felt like they were giving up their local authority, and I think what we're finding is there's an increased recognition that we will prosper more if we work together, and that if the region prospers, each of the local governments prosper.
A lot of people would advocate and say maybe we ought to have much more of regional governments and less of these small independent cities and governing bodies, and the dollars would go a lot further. Your thoughts on that?
Well, we're big advocates of local government, and local government where they know the issues and concerns of their citizens best. That said, we know that they need to work together, and we help them do that. A lot of our work focuses on trying to help local government be more efficient, more effective. They understand that their roads cross jurisdictional boundaries, their rivers and streams cross jurisdictional boundaries, parks need to connect with each other, regardless of who owns them. So I think we're a way that allows that to happen.
I was digging through some stuff not too long ago. I ran across your magazine, SIMCOG magazine, and on the cover from 2001 was improving transit in Southeast Michigan, a framework for action. There's also one about the 2025 Regional Transit Plan for Southeast Michigan. And then in 2000, the cover was Water Quality, the Important Role of Local Governments. So there'll be some who say, we've been talking about roads and transit and water quality for a long time. Are we really making
Absolutely.
improvements?
I mean, planning is a process, and each of these plans accomplish certain things, and then they identify other things we need to look at. For example, in the area of water, early on our water plans focused on what do we need to do at wastewater treatment plants and what do we need to do in industry. Then it moved to what do we need to do with how we use our land and what flows off the land. And most recently, our water plans are focusing on how can we take advantage of water resources in terms of driving our economy and driving recreation and quality of life. The other thing that's evolved is it's not only addressing the role of local governments in these areas, but the role of the general citizens and residents of our region, that we all have a role to play in cleaning up the water, what we do on our property, maintaining our cars so that they don't leak onto the roadways.
You have made this exhibit interactive. So Kathleen, this is one of the interactive exhibits, correct?
Correct.
All right, what is this?
Well, this is a map of local sites around the region, and we're asking people to name the facility and identify where it is. And for example, here's a facility, the zoo. So look at number 11 and we can pick it up and it will tell us where it is on the map.
Very good. And how many of these are? About 18?
There are 18, and they are located, as you can see from the map on the wall, all over the region. And what we want to reinforce is that there's interesting places everywhere in Southeast Michigan, and we want to encourage our visitors to take the opportunity to see these sites in our region.
Make it a learning experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because more often than not, people are from one particular area. They know that area pretty well, but they may not have ventured into another section of the region.
Right, there's interesting places all over, and we want to be a region of different kinds of places because that will make us more attractive.
Okay. Last question, what do you hope to see 50 years from now?
Well, I hope to see a more educated region. I think one of the keys to the region's prosperity is attracting a broader range of business and industry, and we're hearing more and more that what drives industry and business location is talent. So I'm hoping that we'll be a more educated region, and we're spending some time right now focusing on how we can make the region's education and workforce systems better.
Our special thanks to Willie Brooks and the executives over at SimCog. I'm Chuck Stokes. We'll be back next week with more newsmakers in the spotlight. From theCUBE, have a great week.